U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry arrives in Africa for a round of counterterrorism talks. The challenges and dangers that albinos face in Uganda. And that's settled. American actors Johnny Depp and Amber Heard reach a divorce agreement. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Africa Monday, where he held talks in Nairobi, Kenya, with East African foreign ministers on ways to stop neighboring South Sudan from sliding back into civil war. Secretary Kerry began his trip Monday by holding talks with Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta before joining the other ministers. South Sudan has been troubled almost since the day it gained independence from Sudan in 2011. On behalf of the United States, Mr. Kerry had a very important announcement for the people of South Sudan.
Today, I am also announcing nearly $138 million in new aid from the United States to the people of South Sudan, and we are already the largest donor in the world to the effort to help sustain the people of South Sudan on a humanitarian basis with $1.6 billion that we have contributed. The new funds, $138 million, will be used to provide food, water, and medicine to those in need. But I want to make this clear, and I particularly think it's important for the people back home who are engaged in trying to help. I'm talking about our taxpayers in the United States. We made it crystal clear that this is not forever. We're not just going to fill in a void. We're not just going to provide help incessantly. If they're not willing to accept responsibility and do the things necessary to deliver to their people.
Well, for details on Secretary Kerry's visit to Kenya and his message to the people of South Sudan, VOA's Jill Craig joins us live via Skype from Nairobi. Jill, that help, that financial help was given, but with a disclaimer. How significant was that?
That's a great question, Vincent. And that disclaimer was brought up several times in several different ways throughout Secretary Kerry's visit today. He did indeed say that this aid will not go on forever, warning that the U.S. taxpayer will not be funding the rebuilding of South Sudan when its own leaders aren't always the most proactive when it comes to doing that themselves. So I would say that this was a very key point of Kerry's message today.
Okay, well, also kind of showing some element of some sense of frustration. But also there's something else that Secretary Kerry did say about South Sudan. Can you give us that?
Absolutely. So another major point that Secretary Kerry made today on South Sudan was that he and the United States government are in full support of a protection force going into South Sudan. This protection force was recently approved at the UN Security Council, a resolution for about 4,000 troops to be coming into South Sudan. And Secretary Kerry reiterated the U.S. government's support of this force. In fact, the U.S. government actually sponsored the resolution that made its way to the UN Security Council. And he also made it clear that this is not an intervention force. And he mentioned that at least twice during his remarks this afternoon. And by that, what he meant was that the protection force is intended to allow free access, freedom of movement, and the ability for citizens to go about their daily lives without being attacked. And so that's basically what he was saying is the difference between a protection force and an intervention force, and that he is very much in favor of the protection force. And
we know that the Secretary Kerry's day has been busy. He did also tackle the issue of another neighbor of Kenya, that is Somalia. What stood out of that talks on Somalia?
Yes, South Sudan and Somalia were the two major points today as they continued to talk about regional security. In Somalia, he actually announced an additional $117 million in U.S. aid to Somalia, and that's to help with refugees, returnees, and also victims of drought. So he did reiterate the U.S.'s support for Somalia in that way. They also talked a bit about AMISOM, and as you know, and as your viewers know, the African Union has had a force in Somalia that's supposed to be helping to stabilize that country. And the regional partners have decided that by 2018 there will be a drawdown of those AMISOM troops. And so as a result, Kerry made sure that his opinion was made very clear on this, that the Somali national government must have their own troops in place and trained properly so that they can sort of take over that vacuum that may be left by AMISOM.
And on the host country, Kenya, there was a question raised about what the U.S. is doing to support particularly free and fair elections come 2017. What did he say?
Yes, he was asked that question a few times as well. And what he said very diplomatically, especially with Kenyatta, was that the United States refuses to see another 2007 occur, during which time we all know there was some pretty terrible post-election violence. He said that would not happen again, and he was also quite proud of Kenya, he said, for the reforms they've made with the IEBC, or the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission. And he said he was proud of Parliament for proposing a few bills that would actually try to reform that commission, which has caused a bit of conflict in this country in recent months with some of the protests that have been happening every Monday. And so basically, he just said that he thinks Kenya is on the right track, and that they're making the right progress.
Jill, excellent reporting as always. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vincent. Thanks a lot.
That's viewers Jill Craig reporting live via Skype from Nairobi, Kenya. Now to neighboring Somalia, where the United States is condemning two suicide bombing attacks Sunday in central Somalia that killed at least 27 people while wounding another 90. Witnesses and officials said the blasts hit a local government building and a nearby market in El Kayo, located in central Somalia, which has been divided into south and north by clan rivalry. The Somali terrorist group Al-Shabaab has claimed the responsibility for the twin bombings. The attacks are believed to be a response to military operations conducted by U.S.-trained Somali special forces, in which militants were arrested from houses they were hiding in the town and its surroundings. Well, a Malian jihadist has pleaded guilty to ordering the destruction of 9 mausoleums and a mosque in the city of Timbuktu. A hearing Monday at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Ahmadi Al-Faqi Al-Mahdi says that the prosecution's descriptions of what led to attacks that destroyed or severely damaged the cultural sites was accurate.
السيدات والسادة إنني في هذا المقام مع أسف شديد.
Ladies and gentlemen, with deep regret and great pain, I have to enter a guilty plea, and all charges against me are accurate and correct. I'm really sorry, and I'm really remorseful, and I regret all the damages that I have caused the community in Timbuktu, my family, and my country, Mali.
Well, prosecutors say Al-Mahdi was a member of the Ansar Dine militant group that took part in occupying Timbuktu in 2012 as Islamist militants seized power in most of northern Mali. Al-Mahdi was the first suspect to face an ICC charge of deliberately attacking religious or historical monuments, and became the first person to plead guilty at the court since its establishment in 2002. Now, militants destroyed 14 of Timbuktu's 16 mausoleums after condemning them as examples of idolatry. Now, the buildings were restored by the United Nations after a French-led military operation drove the militants from power in northern Mali in 2013. U.S. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump shook up his campaign last week by naming pollster Kellyanne Conway and Breitbart News chief Steve Bannon to head his team. The reshuffle comes amid falling poll numbers and controversy over his former campaign chair's ties to the former Ukraine government. Here's Amanda Scott.
Following his announcement of the changes on Thursday, Trump made a rare expression of regret for some of the sharp and insulting rhetoric that has been a hallmark of his campaign.
Sometimes, in the heat of debate and speaking on a multitude of issues, you don't choose the right words. And I do regret it, particularly where it may have caused personal pain.
Speaking Sunday on ABC Television's This Week program, RNC Chair Reince Priebus said he believes Trump can pivot into the role of a great leader.
And ultimately, the person in charge of Donald Trump's campaign is Donald Trump. And so I think he's on a great pathway to recalibrating the campaign and getting this thing tight.
Speaking on the same program, Clinton campaign manager Robbie Mook disagreed.
We're not seeing a pivot. Donald Trump himself said this was not a pivot. He wants to double down on letting Donald Trump be Donald Trump.
Mook also said, despite the departure of Trump's former campaign chair, Paul Manafort, the Kremlin is still involved in his campaign.
We now need Donald Trump to explain to us the extent to which the hand of the Kremlin is at the core of his own campaign. There's a web of financial interests that have not been disclosed.
Mook has called on Trump to agree on the schedule for the presidential debates. Trump has complained that 2 of the 3 proposed dates coincide with football games. Trump's campaign manager says they are still discussing whether to agree to the debate schedule. Amanda Scott, VOA News, Washington.
Well, last month, Donald Trump kicked up a media storm when he found himself in a feud with the family of a Muslim soldier who died fighting for his country. But hidden away from the spotlight, thousands of American Muslim soldiers, sailors and airmen are quietly serving their country. VOA's Pentagon correspondent Carla Babb caught up with one of those men.
Inside the Pentagon's 9/11 Memorial Chapel, built where Islamic extremists attacked the building nearly 15 years ago. Sounds of the Muslim call to prayer. Dawood Akbar is one of 5 Muslim Army chaplains. Since being stationed at the Pentagon, he leads afternoon prayer here, giving fellow Muslims a chance to connect with their Creator.
Allahu Akbar.
It's about the community that he has built here. It's like providing us with the venue where we can come to say our daily prayers, which is a big thing.
Akbar is not your typical lieutenant colonel. For one, he was born and raised in the West African nation of Ghana.
My dad was trying to get me commissioned in the Ghanaian army as a chaplain. Then I won this U.S. visa lottery. When you are growing up in Africa, not just Ghana, America is the land of prosperity. It's a place you go and do well.
But after months teaching some unruly high schoolers, he felt he needed more discipline and order.
So the military was very easy for me to just be part of it. And that felt home.
His Army career has taken him to war zones in Afghanistan and Iraq. Oftentimes the only Muslim in his unit, Akbar says he works to bridge the gap between cultures.
And they see me in this uniform. They've never fathomed that there is a Muslim in America, especially in the U.S. Army. Then they see one. They are shocked, but then they are happy.
At home, Akbar teaches his children the values of Islam and the importance of character.
He tells us that we can get the good grades, but without the character, it means nothing.
With the political controversy surrounding a proposed ban on Muslims entering the U.S., Akbar teaches his family to remain kind to others. As an Army chaplain, he spent about 2 decades in service to America. But he doesn't judge those who have sought to vilify his faith.
Definitely, some of these things are based on ignorance, and I always see this as an opportunity to teach people. So I want to move on. I want to be able to define my story. I don't want my story to define me. Thank you for coming.
Carla Babb, VOA News, the Pentagon.
Well, a massive disaster recovery effort is underway in the southern U.S. state of Louisiana as flood victims continue to clean homes, rebuild and search for people who may have been trapped by widespread flooding. The flooding, which the American Red Cross describes as the largest natural disaster to hit the United States since Superstorm Sandy, has claimed the lives of at least 13 people and damaged about 60,000 homes. More than 100,000 people have registered for federal aid.
Oh, it's devastation. I mean, it's absolute devastation. I mean, these homes, there's areas that have not flooded. They never flood, and they flooded. Homes that normally flood have not received any water, so no damage. So it's just people that are not used to these things. They're never been prepared for it. You know, it's just caught everyone by surprise.
Well, as recovery efforts continue, so do damage assessments. The Federal Emergency Management Agency says it has already disbursed more than $34 million in aid. President Barack Obama is slated to visit Baton Rouge on Tuesday. The White House says Obama is eager to see the impact of the floods, but wants to make sure his presence does not interfere with ongoing recovery efforts. Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered during the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. Check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, Uganda's albinos fight for their rights. Stay with us.
I am Sheka Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today, we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They tell you what people are talking about. So, for an in-depth look at the stories trending high on social media, turn to #VOA. It's not your typical talk show. From politics to pop culture, #VOA brings in the people leading the conversation, engages the audience, and gets answers to your questions. #VOA. Smart talk for smart people.
Well, in Uganda, people with albinism face a double-edged sword. Discriminated against and targeted for ritual sacrifices, they are one of the most marginalized groups in the country. They live in fear and stigma, but some have managed to overcome. Francis Tumwekwasize finds out how albinos in Uganda are helping each other cope.
13-year-old Twa Kizito and 10-year-old Ibla Mutebi are brothers living with albinism. They have 4 siblings who are not albinos. Born to Annette Agesa in Busigiri village from central Uganda in Wakiso district, Kizito and Mutebi are the only ones who inherited the condition. Due to their physical differences, they face peculiar challenges.
As me and my brother and the albino people.
Me and my brother, like other albinos, it's very difficult to see things slightly far from us. We find problems, say, reading words written on the blackboard. That's why we are allowed to sit in front of the classroom.
Properly, so that they put us in front.
Just like the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, Uganda's albinos and people living with albinism face worse problems than medical implications and social discrimination. The biggest are attitude problems, usually attached to superstitious beliefs surrounding albinism.
Africa in general, they feel that when you meet an albino, it's a curse. And again, they contradict themselves that when you get a body part of an albino, you get riches.
Albinos live a worried existence. Despite fortune seekers make them a target, hunted like animals, murdered, dismembered, and their body parts are sold to witch doctors. Negesa says that she lives in constant fear for her sons' lives. Every time they leave home, I get worried because at any time they can be abducted. I always warn them not to walk alone. When they are going and coming back from school, they must be with their sister. That's why I decided to take them to the nearest school. While at school, Twa and Ibla are closely monitored by their teachers and are always in the company of their young sister, Namutebi Saula. Twa and Ibla are not the only one in such situation. There are over 25,000 registered albinos in Uganda. In a bid to fight stigma, discrimination and fear among albinos, the Uganda Albinos Association organizes periodic social events.
Some people think that
Members empower each other through sharing their experiences, testimonies, and taking guidance from their seniors. Toa and Ibra always participate in these albino community events. I've come with my brother. He's just there. And recently he was kidnapped by unknown people who injected him with some stuff that made him become unconscious. We don't know what they did on him before they released him. There are times when I meet someone and he or she spits at me.
how did I do such a thing? I've got everything on me. Yeah. So come on, you guys be who you are.
While empowering the public to let go of lingering societal attitudes, they explain that violent people are profiting from false beliefs. They want the public to understand that the myths are untrue and albinism is a hereditary condition. Francis Tumwekwasize Bahene for VOA Kampala, Uganda.
Well, it has been 10 years since a ship named the Probokoala unloaded toxic waste into Abidjan's ports, sickening hundreds of thousands and killing at least 15 people. Now, a decade after the scandal, Ivorian authorities say they have cleaned the dumping sites and taken measures to make sure this doesn't happen again. Meanwhile, the victims are still demanding justice and compensation. Emily Eob reports from Abidjan.
It was just 10 years ago that Nicole Blegnaud woke up to a smell of rotten garlic.
It's here that they offloaded the toxic waste. People are cultivating the land here.
Overnight, trucks illegally discharged toxic waste belonging to a ship named the Probokoala in several open-air locations around Abidjan, including here in a landfill in the village of Akwedo. Hundreds of thousands of people living near the site soon got sick and at least 15 died. Blegnaud says residents are still feeling the symptoms to this day.
We all have problems with our eyes, with our skin, strange stomach aches.
Blegnaud said there never was any medical follow-up and the victims are asking to have their medical expenses covered. Residents claim they still can smell the toxic odor when it rains, despite the Ivorian government announcing last year that all locations had been cleaned. Officials said new control measures have been taken at the port.
Each time a ship arrives and the port tells us that they are transporting liquids they want to offload, we systematically send a team over to run an analysis.
The exact composition of the toxic waste from the Probokoala remains unknown. Trafigura, the Dutch oil trading firm that chartered the vessel, has never disclosed it. In 2007, the firm agreed to pay a multi-million-dollar settlement to the Ivorian government in exchange for being exempted from prosecution. It has always downplayed its responsibility in the disaster. For Denis Yao Pipira, president of a collective of victims associations, justice is needed.
S'il n'y a pas eu de sanctions exemplaires, ce serait un laxisme forcément qui va ouvrir la voie.
If there is no exemplary sanction, it will pave the way for new dumping grounds, like the one we experienced in 2006. Companies only focused on saving money will come to Africa to get rid of their waste with total impunity.
10 years later, many victims are still waiting for compensation. Some recently protested in Abidjan, asking for the international community to step in. Emily Yab for VOA News in Abidjan.
Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, an ugly Hollywood split results in a big donation to charity. We'll be right back.
Yep.
للأسف الشديد إن الكلام الذي سمعت.
Il s'engage à ce qu'il n'y ait pas d'appel.
Welcome back. Here's what's trending. Hip-hop star Kanye West launched his latest pop-up shops in 21 venues around the world over the weekend. The lines at both the London and New York City locations were packed with fans, although some people were just interested in buying the items to resell them at a higher price. West announced the move on Twitter with a map of the stores that will be located in cities in the United States, Australia, England, Germany, South Africa, and Singapore. The clothes featured at each pop-up store are customized based on location. Each city getting the pop-up stores this weekend had its name spelled out on T-shirts and hoodies in Gothic script in bold shades. Well, next up, Indian diamond sellers have seen nearly uninterrupted growth in sales over the past 20 years, and fine jewelry ranks highest on the luxury wish list among Indian women. But untraditional habits and tastes of the youngest spenders, who purchase more than half of diamond jewelry in India, are forcing the industry to rethink designs and uses. Young women have been turning their back on traditions and purchase funky gem designs for their wardrobe instead. The industry is also facing a challenge from high tech. Instead of handing out large sums to acquire jewelry, tech-savvy younger generations prefer spending money on electronics. Well, and finally, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard have finally settled their contentious divorce. Just one day before the actors were scheduled to begin a restraining order hearing that would center on Heard's allegations, Depp repeatedly abused her during their marriage. Depp denied the abuse allegations. Amber Heard says she is donating her entire $7 million divorce settlement from Johnny Depp to a pair of charities. The money will be split between the American Civil Liberties Union and the Children's Hospital Los Angeles. The money to the ACLU is being given to help its efforts to combat violence against women. And that is what is trending today. Now, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC and in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC, Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's News Words, where we teach you about words in the news.
When you hear the word consensus in a news story, what does it mean?
Consensus.
The authors came to a consensus. No region is left untouched, says climate analyst Kelly Levin of the World Resources Institute, speaking to us by Skype.
Consensus means to agree or to share the same opinion about something.
In our story, the authors agreed on the same information. The scientists reached a consensus, or agreed, that climate change is a major problem.
Now, when you hear the word consensus, your American English will be good enough to use it in a conversation.